Kia ora, everyone. Welcome to another G News podcast. Well, today I'm standing up on the top of the hill and behind me is Palm Beach. You can see it if I move around like that, and the peninsula going out towards the north, out towards Thompson's Point. So I'm standing on the hills above Palm Beach, and this is actually part of a subdivision where there's a development going on, and probably the people that may come and live here will be pretty well off, pretty much a gentry, people that can really afford the big deposits and the millions of dollars that are involved in buying a big property and a house out here with an amazing view. So this is not your average person that's looking for a first home. In fact, what we're seeing in New Zealand at the moment is a situation where we've actually got about a quarter of the population who are food insecure. And this morning, those who tuned into the Dawn Chorus on Bernard Hickey's website would have actually heard him quoting some statistics that showed that about 25% of us have a situation where some of the time we run out of food, some of the time we're short of food, or food is actually a bit of a problem where we have to juggle other things just to make sure that we've got food on the table or food in the house. And that's the situation that we've arrived at while properties are just so expensive in New Zealand. And it's a real imbalance. But anyway, that's where we are today. And nobody that is being elected into government really seems to have any big solutions for these issues. We've got Christopher Luxon, who's arguing that we want prices to go further up in these conditions, and we've also got Chris Bishop saying no, the Prime Minister's completely wrong. I 100% support the excellent job that he's doing, but he's wrong and we want prices to come down. Well, the truth is property prices would actually have to roughly halve in order for it to become like it used to be about 30 or 40 years ago, where the average income of the average person was something like 4 or 5 times less than the price of the property, and they had a chance of paying it off in a 10 to 20 year period. Now it's about inheriting a whole lot of money, or getting yourself into a $250,000 gig and investing maybe earlier, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and getting onto that ladder. For the rest of, or the majority of us, that's not going to happen. So you're kind of doomed, really, to financial insecurity if you live in this country. And gradually, the situation just gets worse as more and more of the people that own the assets suck up more and more of the assets. And we get this group that have, and we get this group, which is the large majority, that have not. The large majority are mostly represented by people who are working and can't just live off capital, and they want fair tax. They want some kind of system that says, come on now, stop undertaxing the wealthy, the people that own all the assets. And they've been saying so for some time. And we've got ourselves in a situation now where the people that represent the worker, which is the Labour Party, are faced with coming out with some tax policy soon. So the question will be, will they listen to all those workers and do something about this unfairness when it comes to the 9% roughly that the super wealthy pay on their capital income versus the amount of money, roughly something like twice that amount of tax, 22 to 23%, that the worker is paying, the ones that can't afford a home, the ones whose children can't afford a home unless mum and dad, the bank of mum and dad, bail them out. So that's just the opening situation that we find ourselves with. And housing affects everything, doesn't it? Housing is the underlying biggest costs in all of our lives, whether it's the rent because you can't afford that deposit, or whether it's the mortgage. So we all know this. This is nothing new, but I just thought I'd mention it because I think that's the landscape. We've just seen the media nagging and harassing the Labour Party to announce its policies. It's the only political party that has to do so, according to the media. They're being singled out, the Labour Party. It's not fair, but it is the media, and the media say they're balanced, very, very balanced and very, very accurate, and you can trust them, and journalists tell the truth. So apparently that fairness means that you don't ask any other parties for an early take on their policies repeatedly. So I mentioned this yesterday, and I think it's still true today, that we're still seeing that kind of skewedness. Over the last 24 hours, some other commentators have actually picked on the fact that the media are beating up on the Labour Party over TPM, and that TPM had their leaders had come out and apologised for what one of their MPs said, but subsequently, knowing this, Ingrid Hipkiss at Radio New Zealand kept on asking Chris Hipkins, whether or not he could work with TPM on the basis that this one MP had stepped out of line, and the TPM leadership pulling him back into line and apologising was never mentioned by Ingrid Hipkiss on Radio New Zealand. So this is the kind of stuff that drives people away from Radio New Zealand. It's the kind of stuff that puts us off having any faith in the media, that erodes the trust that Jack Tame's always worried about on Q&A. But another thing that does bother us, I think, quite a bit is when we have commentators on social media who are sponsored by the right wing. And this includes people like Sean Plunkett, who until very recently, until he had to go it alone, had no choice, was sponsored by the Wright family until he started saying things that were very unacceptable on a human level everywhere. And the unacceptability of Sean Plunkett's commentary got even to the Wright family, who said, well, we don't want to have anything more to do with this, we set you up, but goodbye. And so now it's Sean Plunkett by himself. Now, over on Sean Plunkett's show, as you know, Stuart Nash, who had broken all the rules foolishly and wrongly, and was rightfully kicked out of the Labour Party for breaking the rules, regardless of whether he was friends or not with the leadership there. Chris Hipkins had the strength of leadership to have some integrity and kick Stuart Nash to the curb, even in an election year, which is a very good quality that we want in a leader, someone that's actually able to stick to the rules. We saw Nash recently sort of saying, well, I would have thought my buddy would have actually bent all the rules and been crooked, like Nash maybe could be seen to be here. He's the rule breaker. And he tried to put that back on Chris Hipkins. Now, as you know, Nash actually went out and said some things about what is a woman, because when it comes to imported culture wars, there's a small minority of New Zealand men, basically, who are very, very worried about, what kind of genitals people have, and whether we can police the toilets, and using words from overseas that they borrowed that they haven't even thought of themselves, distorting what woke means. As you know, woke originally meant to be aware of racial discrimination, to be vigilant about it, and that was twisted by right-wing white males mostly to mean something about being overly politically correct, something of this nature, burdensome, because it didn't affect those white males, not much like proper English spelling or proper English grammar doesn't affect them. So, they run around the internet and they worry about what's the definition of a woman. And you get to see this kind of commentary from Ryan Bridge. It's the first thing that he asked Chris Hipkins on the Herald Now, because it's the first and only conversation that he wants to have. He wants to trap people into saying something that's considered to be woke, and therefore a whole bunch of white males that can't spell or don't know English grammar can actually feel good about themselves and say, whoa, I'm more of a man as a result. I'm not woke like you people. But to people who are educated, who understand and believe in science and evidence-based policy, woke is really just a reflection of the prejudice and the racism and the unnecessary kind of race baiting and outrage that goes on social media. And we see that this is really what outfits like The Platform, who are sponsored until recently by people with a vested interest, are really about. Now, there's been quite a bit of commentary about Duncan Garner in this regard too. He's coming from a right-wing angle. You just have to look at all of his recent material. Who's it targeting? Well, it's basically targeting Te Pāti Māori, or all things Māori, actually. And this is done with sort of like, I'm not racist, but, and then overemphasizing, issues in the media, complaining about the media when it doesn't do the bidding of the New Zealand First Party, bringing on New Zealand First politicians and having some sponsors. And some of those sponsors, are in there that they want to share in an audience that's, getting something like between 10 and 30,000 views per video, I think. And they want to be part of that, want to make money out of that, so they support this, and they're probably aligned with the kind of things that Duncan Garner is saying these days. Well, Duncan Garner, he had a crack at how the media weren't doing a good job over Aureni because TVNZ, according to Duncan Garner, is not part of the New Zealand media, and neither is Q&A. And so he used Q&A as his source material to prove that the media weren't really showing us what's going on with TPM, and how Aureni didn't know the answer to a couple of questions that Jack Tame put to her, and had to reach for her cell phone in order to check some information. But this was all about Mikey Sherman telling Jack Tame that Aureni had been authentic, and Duncan Garner didn't agree. He thought she wasn't authentic. She was a liar, she was a cheat, she was wrong somehow. I guess that's what the definition of being authentic is, that you're being yourself. And I happen to know firsthand, you know, that I sat there, and when Aureni didn't know something, she just honestly said, I'm not going to say I do know something when I don't. And that is what it means when you're authentic. You're prepared to stand there and say, look, I don't know. And that's being authentic, and people like that about people. It's genuine and it's real. It's much more real than Duncan Garner, who changes what he thinks depending on where the money is, in my opinion. But what we're seeing with Duncan these days is kind of conflation, poor arguments. The fact that he doesn't get it doesn't mean that other people don't get it. And so this all confused Duncan a lot. You know, he didn't really get why Aureni didn't quite know the answer to a couple of questions, and why she had to get to her cell phone, and he therefore thought she wasn't being authentic. He didn't think that she was up to it. And it's also the case that there's a lot of talk after this by-election about what it means and how much you can take from it all when it comes to other elections, like the local body elections happen to coincide right now. Will it mean that one copies the other? Will there be an equally low turnout? Probably not, because, you know, as Chris Hipkins continually keeps repeating to everybody, that by-election in Tamaki Makaurau had a very unique circumstances about it, you know, and it didn't have anybody from the ACT Party that was prepared to speak on behalf of Māori. It didn't have anyone at all from New Zealand First that pretended to speak for Māori or represent Māori interests anywhere up and down the country. This is not, you know, Shane Jones and co, they don't represent Māori, neither does Winston. So the National Party, you know, is fond of saying it's got a few Māori people like Tama Potaka, it's got the guy in the South Island, but it didn't put anyone up because it doesn't really represent Māori interests, does it? It's more about the corporate takeover, the corporate interests, the big end of town, not the little guy, the people that are developing the land and pushing up the prices. Those are the people that are going to get a good deal by voting for National. So I think what we're seeing there on social media from Duncan Garner is if someone's prepared to sponsor you, then you can actually drill into a particular pocket and selectively kind of promote things and put up fairly lame arguments that don't really stand up to scrutiny. And so, you know, that's Duncan's gig these days, but it doesn't mean that we can't criticise what Duncan says, because mostly it's pretty raw and pretty wrong. So I just thought I'd chip that in this morning. Yesterday in Parliament we saw Winston Peters trying to race bait blood quantums of TPM again, because one of the signs of desperation from the right wing when it's going down in the polls and it can't form a government even in its first term is to attack TPM and say, well, look, a vote for Labour is a vote for TPM and it will be a circus and they couldn't possibly get together, and what kind of government would it be? It would be unstable. But it's all rubbish, isn't it? Because as was said on Martin Bradbury's show, there's alignment of about 85% between the Greens and TPM. 85%, that's a very strong overlap, isn't it? So those two don't have to disagree on very much because they agree on nearly everything. And the Labour Party is pretty a long way from 50% by itself. So it's going to have to come together with the Greens and TPM, and the Greens will be a major factor in terms of what the look of the next government is. And that could mean that we have to convince people on the right that climate scientists are not just pulling a hoax, that science is valuable, that science tells us what's true and what's not, that science is valuable, not just Duncan Garner and his reckons, you know, or not just Sean Oliver Plunkett and his prejudices and reckons, and not just talking about, you know, what a woman is and the way that Stuart Nash would describe it very, very crudely and insult womankind just basically, well, a good number of them, just because of the crudeness of the way that that man speaks. And so who wants to be associated with that? Well, some people, some men that can't spell that come onto my page and criticise me, they certainly love New Zealand First. They love the foreign buyers. They love the way that we're selling out to foreign buyers for $5 million. They can come and snap up our properties. I think that's pretty clear. They buy into being told that it's only like 1% and that there'll be absolutely no effect on the rest of the property market or any of the other prices because they're told that, so they don't seek out any evidence. They're not really great thinkers, they're not really great spellers, are they? And you can kind of see them coming in sort of talking about, you know, their single issues they're pretty upset about the idea of women in power. They're pretty upset about Maori representation or fairness under the treaty. They're very afraid. And we talked about how afraid people that vote for NZ First are. Very afraid of the treaty and integrity and honouring contracts and being a sort of an honest citizen. Very, very afraid of that. And so we saw yesterday Winston Peters going on about blood quantums and insulting Debbie Ngārewa-Packer. So today we'll see if Jerry has examined Hansard, because Hansard shows that Winston Peters' statement that they were yelling out all about it first, and that you know, that would have been in Hansard if that was true. That it was Debbie that was saying this, they were talking about blood quantums, and I just responded to them, is what Winston said. And we'll see if Jerry Brownlee looks at that and goes, that's a lie, or whether he goes, look, because it's a man, because it's a guy that's on my side of politics, will I just go softly? If this had been a Green Party female like Chloe, maybe I would have banned her to the weekend, maybe I would have banned her beyond that until she apologises. But probably what we'll see with Jerry is he just forgets what happened yesterday. We'll probably see with Jerry that if there's an apology, it'll just be sort of like, you know, a basic apology, no more than that. No banning, no naming, no none of those things that happen if you're a woman. If you're a woman and if you're on the left-hand side of politics, well, he comes down on you like a ton of you-know-what. So it's not very fair, and I think people were appalled yesterday at how many things Jerry missed and how Jerry started batting for one side and got uptight and emotional again, not neutral. He kind of undermined that role, and people are calling for him to go. People are calling for him to go, but not Audrey Young. Audrey Young thinks that Jerry's superb, that everything about Jerry is good. That's the wind just blowing my tripod over here. It's a bit of a windy day up here on the top of the hill. I had to walk all the way up here to bring you this little update. Anyway, yeah, so 2 o'clock we'll see what Jerry does, and we're not expecting much from Jerry. We've seen what Jerry does before. We see how they keep getting away with this. We see how the press don't really make much of a big deal about it. It's not a headline. It's not as if Nicola Willis had said it. If Nicola Willis had said something, that would be a headline, because she gets the agency. They listen to her, they repeat her, and they go easy on her when it comes to things like the full story about what she knew. That text that came up yesterday, that really didn't create much of a headline. In fact, they just took what Nicola Willis said and made that a headline. So it's these kind of subtle but evidential type of things that we see all the time. And at the same time, you've got Duncan saying it's not fair on New Zealand First. There's some talk about doing something about the gentailers. They're getting together in the next day or so. They're talking about next year and energy security, because you can imagine what would happen if we had big power cuts or huge power price spikes to the vote in an election year. So We've got the likes of Simon Watts, the guy that bought us those huge, massive water bills, going around at the moment trying to get the gentailers to secure supply at Huntly, to burn a lot of coal, to put a lot of emissions up into the atmosphere and to make the climate a lot worse, to drag us closer to all of those trigger points that are irreversible, that really damage mankind and all of life on planet Earth. So Simon Watts, you know, he's the guy that maybe in the future, if people are listening to these digital recordings, they can come back and go, it was Simon Watts that did that, with regard to the choices that we could have made now regarding the climate. We also saw Winston sitting on his hands and trying to hide away from the New Zealand public regarding a decision on Palestinian statehood. The way I read it was that he was not going to tell the New Zealand public anything. He was going to keep it dark. He was going to hide from all New Zealand voters, especially New Zealand First voters don't deserve to know. So he'll keep that secret. He'll take it on a plane over to the United Nations, and on around about the 23rd of September, Winston will tell us what the decision was to try and minimise any kind of fallout politically to New Zealand First or to Christopher Luxon or to the ACT Party. So this is putting themselves first and genocide not mattering, kind of being a little bit complicit with genocide in a way because of the amount of time they're taking to come to a decision, not putting any pressure on Israel at all here, claiming that they've done all this stuff about one or two politicians there that stepped over a line, but absolutely being missing in action, not being there, showing their lack of humanity and their selfishness at times like this. And I think most people who are fair-minded Kiwis would agree with that. So we've also basically heard that when it comes to how much the price of our private operations that Simeon Brown is orchestrating at the moment, that's a secret. That's, when Nicola Willis says, I believe in transparency and openness, well, not when it comes to many issues, and one of them is the price of all those private operations. The National Party doesn't want anybody in New Zealand to know how much they're paying for these private operations. It's a big secret, and the way to keep a secret is to say, well, it's commercially sensitive, therefore you can never know, and we'll lock it all up, and we'll just make sure that you don't hold us to account. So that's Simeon Brown. Simeon Brown's got to go. This is just naked neoliberal privatisation and covering up the costs of everything. Because you just wait, anytime soon, Nicola Willis will be screeching, how are you going to pay for it? Tax and spend. How are you going to pay for it? Tax and spend. While she, on the same level, will not tell the New Zealand public, neither will Simeon Brown, what the price of those private operations are. It's a big secret. And when it comes to secrets, well, we all saw that paper that Nicola Willis and Christopher Luxon tried to keep it secret, that showed that there was concern about the weakening of public services in New Zealand if we keep on going down the pink pantsuit austerity track with these reshufflings that can't go on forever, these reprioritisations that aren't infinite because it's a finite amount of resources that you can keep on cutting and keep on reshuffling. The weakening of public services is not something any New Zealander really wants. When you need those services, you need them. You don't need them to fail on you. It could be life and death. It could be really, really bad. We also saw statistics coming out that sort of showed us that when it comes to Maori, they're more just double the risk of getting heart attacks, double the risk of getting certain kinds of cancers and things in our society. So we've got a long, long way to go before things are equitable. Equitable is not a word that Davey Boy likes. He likes equal. He likes to think that the richest, most privileged people are exactly the same as the kids that are going without food and going without a warm, dry home. He thinks it's all an equal level playing field, and equity is wrong. And I think everybody, particularly men that can't spell or know anything about English grammar, who vote for ACT also agree with Davey Boy here. It's totally fair. Everything's just fair. And that's why we don't vote for ACT. And we have a different set of values that say it's important to put things right, and recognise when there's a real disadvantage. And I think that's the case with the disadvantage, the intergenerational disadvantages that have been created under colonialism, that we need to grow up and understand, and people that come onto G News and can't spell and don't know English grammar need to kind of spend a bit more time, buy a history book, maybe something by Vincent O'Malley, maybe something there that can explain the history of the treaty, what was going on in the Colonial Office, what the different forces were at work over the years. Anyway, I do recommend that history is important, and maybe it'll take another generation of kids to come through before we've got a society that's well enough educated and that can actually spell and do grammar properly, unlike a lot of these right-wing men that just prove every day that they're not very, they're not really with it, are they? So, they lose a lot of credibility. So that's probably about all I have to say at the top of the hill here today. And there's obviously going to be Parliament soon, so we'll see what Jerry does. There was a number of other issues that were flying around, but they basically came down to the same kind of things. What's going to happen next year? How do we get rid of this government that's so bad? The fact that Christopher Luxon isn't showing up to Parliament, that he's absent, that he's Mr. Grabby, that he's over where Winston should be, but he's not at the Pacific Island Forum. So this guy, when it was Jacinda Ardern, everyone was howling. All of those men that can't spell, they were howling to the moon about how she needs to stay in the country. She needs to be in Auckland during a lockdown. She needs to be here. She needs to be there. But now look at them. Now look at the hypocrisy. Now look at that hypocrisy. So yeah, they're silent now when it comes to Christopher Luxon. But Christopher Luxon's not here to face the questions. He's not here to talk about the $44,000 that was spent on a photo op for that helicopter, is he? He's running away from accountability. And it doesn't look like Erica and Chris Bishop are going to win any election if the Project 11 happens before Christmas. So National Party is really going down. If it changes who the leader is, it goes down. If it doesn't change who the leader is, it goes down. It's really done its chips. It's all over. It's over. So now what we're looking for is TPM, the Greens, and Chris Hipkins and the Labour Party to get together at the appropriate time, which of course will be a little bit later and closer to the election, like they have already told the media a million times, and just agree what they can agree without being hassled and nagged and pushed around and singled out by an unfair, biased and prejudiced media that no one can trust. So that's all I have to say. Have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you all again soon.
Welcome to G News, the good news.
Yeah.